Professor Asanga Tilakaratne is now an Emeritus Professor at the University of Colombo in Pali and Buddhist Studies, and where he was the founder head of the Department of Buddhist Studies. He was the director of the Postgraduate Institute of Pali and Buddhist Studies at the University of Kelaniya also. And now he is not actually retired because he's serving as the editor-in-chief for the Encyclopaedia of Buddhism for the Ministry of Buddha Sasana and Religious Affairs for the government. And he has published widely, both in Sinhala and in English, more than 20 books and over 100 papers. And his collected volumes, which are in 8 volumes, were published in 2021, last year only. So thank you, Asanga, for accepting the invitation from the Sri Lanka Literary Society and for giving us this talk. I first heard you, I think, not that long ago, when you gave the 150th keynote lecture of the Anagarika birth anniversary, 150th birth anniversary in Hammersmith Town Hall. So since then, I haven't heard you because we are in various parts of the world. So we're looking forward to it. And over to you. I'll get your screens, your PowerPoint slides up.
Thank you very much, Shihan. Thank you very much for asking me to get into this discussion. In fact, Shihan is my wife's friend, and they come from Pandura, and as I understand, her father was their family dog. So this is the nakama between us, and So thank you, Shihan. Again, it's good to see, and also good to talk to all people who gathered, and also at least one of my erstwhile friend is here, Suraj. So nice to see all of you. Okay, without further ado, let me get into this subject. In fact, when I was asked to speak on Anagarika Dharmapala, I was kind of wondering, I mean, why are we discussing Anagarika Dharmapala, particularly in the context of Sri Lanka? I don't see much of discussions. Of course, sporadic, occasional discussions do happen, but we don't have much of a discussion about Anagarika Dharmapala lately. So I was just wondering, why we are discussing Anagarika Dharmapala at all. But then when I was trying to reason out the topic, I finally thought that, I mean, Anagarika Dharmapala being a multifaceted personality, there are so many the aspects, issues we can discuss when we discuss Anagarika Dharmapala. So I thought I will focus on something that is not very often discussed in the context of Anagarika Dharmapala, namely the universalist Buddhism, the global Buddhism. Anagarika Dharmapala seems to propose now, of course, almost 9 decades back. He passed away in 1933, so we are in the 21st century. So therefore, I would like to discuss today, I mean, although we know that Anagarika Dharmapala, his life is full of so many things, I'm not going to focus on all aspects of his life, but I will be basically focusing on this the universalist interpretation of Anagarika Dharmapala's, the Buddhism. So that is what basically. Now, when I look at to contextualize Anagarika Dharmapala discussion, particularly the academic discussion of Anagarika Dharmapala, we know that the popular understanding, particularly among the academia, of Anagarika Dharmapala was that he was Sinhala Buddhist extremist for some people, or Sinhala Buddhist chauvinist. So this kind of the somewhat negative, somewhat, he was a parochial person, too much worried about Sinhala Buddhist identity and, things like that. Finally passed away in India as a frustrated person, that kind of summary you see in some of the academic publications. However, lately I can see that Anagarika Dharmapala is viewed in a broader perspective, I would say more in positive terms. Now, let me give you out of many examples, just two examples. I mean, one is the H.L. Seneviratne's this well-known work, Works of Kings. This was published by Chicago University Press in 1999. Now, the main theme of H.L. Seneviratne's work is really based on Anagarika Dharmapala's activism. So, according to H.L. Seneviratne, Anagarika Dharmapala had a vision for the Buddhist monks, namely that he is the one who introduced what we call today the social service as the role of the life work of the Buddhist monk. So now, when Anagarika Dharmapala introduced social service as the role of the Buddhist monk, function of the Buddhist monk, according to H.L. Seneviratne, there were two main groups of Buddhist monks in Sri Lanka who kind of undertook this as their the vocation. They are represented by Vidyodaya Pirivena and Vidyalankara Pirivena. So then both the groups of monks accepted Anagarika Dharmapala's interpretation of the Buddhist monk as a social service person, and then these two powerful groups of Buddhist monks in the country accepted Anagarika Dharmapala's characterization. However, according to H.L. Seneviratne, two groups went into two almost diametrically opposed directions. I have elsewhere, somewhere else, studied this claim in much detail, and I'm not going to talk about it this afternoon. However, so this is one of the kind of powerful interpretation of Anagarika Dharmapala. Anagarika Dharmapala as the definer of the role of the Buddhist monk, a person who defined the role of the Buddhist monk. And more recently, to 2015, there was another very interesting book by let me see. Actually, we don't have electricity, as you know. So that is Stephen Kemper. Stephen Kemper's book was also published by University of Chicago Press. The title of the book is Rescued from the Nation, Anagarika Dharmapala in Global Buddhism. Let me see it. Rescued from the Nation, Anagarika Dharmapala and the Buddhist World. I'm sorry. So the title of the book is, but this book, I thought, I mean, there are many books. I'm not going to refer to all the books. There are many other books. But this particular interpretation by this author in the book title, Rescued from the Nation. Now, I think this very title kind of give you an impression. Basically, Stephen Kemper's thesis is that Anagarika Dharmapala is the universalist. So on the one hand, we know that he is popularly understood as Sinhala Buddhist extremist, also Sinhala Buddhist chauvinist. But here we see that there is a totally different interpretation of Anagarika Dharmapala as not as parochial or limited person, but as a person who was guided by universalism, some form of universalism or some form of universalist philosophy. Now, taking some type of inspiration from Stephen Kemper, in this presentation, I thought that I will look at the birth of a kind of universal Buddhism in Dharmapala's thought. Now, in other words, again, you could be thinking that this whole thing is kind of anachronistic, because how can a person like Anagarika Dharmapala imagine
which I always had in my mind was, what's the meaning of Anagarika? Does anybody know? Suraj? Do you know what it means to say Anagarika? Now, I know of Anagarika Dharmapala, but not many other people use that term in front of their names. I mean, who is Anagarika and when? Oh, Sriya is Sriya. Go on.
Sorry, Anagarika means actually it's like homeless. He doesn't have a specific home.
Ah, right. Okay. Agara is, your room.
Yeah.
Agara means no home. Okay, I see.
That's right, because he went from his home to a different place and for his work. So he didn't consider it as a home. Yeah.
And one, you asked me, my understanding is also, it expands on what I just heard, and that is that Anagarika is a reflection of a certain level of renunciation.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Including not having a home, and so it sort of encompasses the whole. In the strictest sense, I think it's the fact that he hasn't not having a home, but it also adds up lots of other elements to it.
Yeah. So between monkhood and celibacy, so between the two, like.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, he became a monk eventually. Yeah.
Eventually, yeah.
So are there any other people who call themselves Anagarika as well? And I think I have heard others.
There were a few.
But it's not very common, huh?
Ruan, recently one of our friend's son became an Anagarika. He was ordained at Chithurst as an Anagarika. He was a doctor. So that is like the stepping stone to monkhood is how I understood it.
Yeah, it is something like that. Yeah.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, yeah.
You're back.
Yeah, I'm sorry because there is no electricity, and I had to shift into my telephone. So, but anyway, if you can hear me, that's fine. So, what I was the describing was basically the different types of interpretation of Anagarika Dharmapala, and then the concept of Buddhism Anagarika Dharmapala developed. And then the background. So in my presentation, I will be focusing on the material that kind of support that interpretation. So look at my the first slide. I give the name of the parents and also his the grandfather. Now the family background in Anagarika Dharmapala is very urban background. Now their parents come from southern Sri Lanka, got established in Colombo, and gradually became leading business people. And particularly, his father was Don Karoli Sevavitarana and Mallika Dharma Gunawardana, whose father donated land to establish Vidyodaya Pirivena. That means they belong into leading Buddhist families in Colombo. And then also we know that particularly from mother's side, both of course mother and father were very established Buddhist, but particularly the household atmosphere of Dharmapala was very religious and very Buddhist. Okay. And
Asanga, I think this is your first slide, I think, isn't it? So Shihan, if you can share the slides.
Oh, okay. screen share. Hold on.
I thought I'm using my own personal one, but I thought you all are sharing it. Is it?
No, not yet. Yeah, that's why I thought I would highlight that so that you have good clarity.
Okay.
So yeah.
So can you can't see my screen?
No? Shall I do it then?
Wait, hold. Now can you see? I think you can.
Yeah, it's coming, it's
Because-
coming, yeah.
Now I'm going to the full view.
That's it.
Okay, we will move into the second. Yeah, so the parents, and then the interesting thing is when you look at the education, the home environment was strongly Buddhist. But if you look at Dharmapala's education was basically Christian. The St. Mary's School Peta and St. Benedict School and the Christian boarding school in Kotte and St. Thomas. St. Thomas, I think, I'm not sure whether it is Kotte or St. Thomas Mount Lavinia, but all 4 different schools he attended were Christian schools, because the education was basically Christian education by this time. So this indicates the exposure to a different religion and different culture. Now it is very interesting to see that Anagarika Dharmapala as a young child, young student, I mean, he got all the training and all the gathas and everything from his mother, from home. But when he went to school, particularly when he was made the student of boarding school, he experienced the English language, the studying Bible by heart, and all different culture really. At one point he mentions one of his teachers in this, I think, Christian boarding school, one day he shot a bird, and then bird fell down dead. So Dharmapala, I mean, this shook his idea about a teacher, because his idea about the teacher was that teacher is such a, the reverential, compassionate person who would never violate the first Buddhist precept. That was the kind of image he had about teacher. But when he saw this particular person, one of his teachers shot down a bird, he got very, very, very upset. Now, although he got upset about it, I think in a way that was very stark way to expose to another religion. So you can see on the one hand, he mastered Buddhism at home, and he mastered the Bible and Christianity at school. But at the same time, he was kind of comparing the two traditions, as also a child. So the important thing I see in here is his exposure to we know that Christianity was, I mean, like, the spread in many areas, many more areas than Buddhism, particularly by that time. So Christianity was a world religion, perhaps number one by its spread. So exposure to that was very interesting. The contrast, on the one hand, Buddhism, which prohibits killing, and the killing is never discouraged, and you never experience killing even an animal by your teacher. So that is Buddhism. But on the other hand, you experience to Christianity. And then when we move into the next slide, we can see that his formative years were very much he was influenced by some of the leading Buddhist monks during that period. As I indicated to you earlier, the Vidyodaya Pirivana was started in 1873 by the Most Venerable Hikaduwe Sumangala. The land for this Pirivana was donated by Dharmapala's maternal grandfather. So, which means that he had very close, the relationship with Vidyodaya Pirivana, and particularly the Hikaduwe Sumangala Thera. And also the other Buddhist monk is very well known, Migettuwatte or Mohottiwatte Gunananda Thera. Now he was the key person in the Pandura Debate, which took place in 1873. But by that time, Dharmapala was, the very young child of 9 years, young child. Maybe he didn't understand everything that was going on. But of course, he must have felt the heat during this period, the Pandura Debate. Now, Pandura Debate, although it is very interesting to note that Pandura Debate, the vocal part was basically done by Migettuwatte Gunananda, but in fact, the intellectual reservoir behind Migettuwatte Gunananda Thera was headed by the monks like Hikkaduwe Sri Sumangala. In other words, the doctrinal and philosophical points which were elaborated by Migettuwatte Gunananda Thera in the debate were really rehearsed and given by the council of the members of the Sangha headed by Hikkaduwe Sumangala. So therefore you can see that he was fortunate enough to associate from very early childhood some of the leading Buddhist monks in the country during that period. And then the next very important thing is arrival of Henry Steele Olcott and Madame Blavatsky. They arrived in 1880. Theosophists becoming Buddhist, bringing modernism to the Buddhist of the country. Now, the arrival of these two people, Henry Steele Olcott and Blavatsky, marks a beginning of, in the way we can say that, Buddhist modernism in the country. Now, up to that point, of course, the culture and the society, although it was getting exposed to the influences of Western colonialism, but basically still our society was very early, not really modern in that sense, but not. I mean, we were coming out from imperial rule in Sri Lanka, but of course, still the atmosphere was very much, we can see that the feudal atmosphere. And then people were doing things pretty much in the fairly ancient manners. So, looking from that point of view, we can see that the arrival of these two Westerners was really it marked a new way of doing things, new way of dealing with issues for the Buddhist in the country. I mean, I'm not going to, talk too much about the people. I think this is common knowledge, how they did things and, how they initiated a lot of activities. And also the Buddhist schools and the Buddhist flag was initiated by them. So many things. But as far as Anagarika Dharmapala is concerned, we know that when they arrived, Dharmapala was young, the young adolescent of 16 years of age. And so he got into contact with these two people, and again you can see that looking from the point of view of the influence of these people, I mean, they are bringing in different culture, they are bringing in different way of thinking, different way of doing things. So that way the arrival of these two people marked another stage of Anagarika Dharmapala's development. Okay. Now, moving into the next slide, one very important thing that happened to Anagarika Dharmapala at this early stage was he was asked to be the translator to Henry Steele Olcott. And then Olcott toured the many parts of the country, and Dharmapala accompanied him. Now, it is very interesting to see that at a very young age, Dharmapala helping Olcott to know the local culture and the local people, it is very interesting to see that it is not only Olcott, but even Dharmapala himself discovered his own people and discovered his own land in these tours. You can see that in his later activism, particularly in connection with Sri Lanka. These tours help him quite a lot. So gradually, as a young person with these exposures with the Christian and Western education and the Buddhist exposure to the great Buddhist personalities, and also exposure to personalities such as Olcott and Madame Blavatsky, you can see how Dharmapala's character was formed with these multiple positive influences. So, and also we should not forget the fact that he is coming from a business family, in the Colombo city, who were the key people in the business community in the country. And then I think with this exposure, it's very interesting to see that Dharmapala, on the one hand, tried to teach people, Sri Lankan people, modern culture. That is a kind of cultural revolution. Even things like how to eat, how to dress, all these things. Now, there is one very well-known work formulated by him, which is called Dana Gatayutu Karunu. Now, Dana Gatayutu Karunu, things that we should know. Now, this, if you look at the list, you can see that actually I think this document is available online and everyone can have a look at it. It is very interesting to see that he is trying to introduce a kind of posh culture to the people in the country. Now, in a way, this is very strange, because we know that we had our culture was basically Sinhala Buddhist culture. Particularly in the Buddhist culture, we know that things like how to eat, how to sit down, how to wear your clothes, and everything has been taught. But unfortunately, under the 400 plus years of colonialism, people had lost this tradition. So Anagarika Dharmapala was trying to reintroduce this tradition. But the interesting thing is, in his reintroduction, he was not only introducing our Buddhist practices or the Buddhist heritage, but he was introducing also the things he derived from Western culture also. So in that sense, we can see that he wanted to develop a kind of urban, the polished culture among the people. So that was one aspect of Dharmapala's activism in Sri Lanka. The other very important activism is vision for an industrialized economy for Ceylon. And he visited European countries, and also he visited Japan, and particularly in 1904, in his second visit to he was in UK, London and Liverpool. He wanted to study the industrial schools there. And then he wanted to send some selected young people from here to Japan and Western countries. In fact, he did that. Of course, we don't, I have read somewhere they have come back after the training and they were employed, but Dharmapala had to engage in other things. So how far it was successful, we don't know. But the important thing is to understand Dharmapala's way of thinking. You can see that at the very early stage, like at the beginning of the 20th century, he was thinking of an industrialized economy for the country. Now, this is, in a way, you can see that this is a very radical thinking, because our country is still, by and large, we are an agricultural country still. even more than 100 years later. But at a very early stage, you can see that Anagarika Dharmapala was envisioning situation, economy for the country, industrialized economy. Okay. Now, when we study Dharmapala, Dharmapala's activism is spread over, I recognize 3 areas. I mean, geographically. One is his own country, Sri Lanka. The other is India. The other is Europe. I mean, the Western world in general, but it is not only Western world. He also even went to Japan and Malaysia and the Oriental countries also. So therefore, Dharmapala's activism can be studied under his activism in Sri Lanka, in Ceylon those days, and then activism in India and activism in the Western world. Now, the Indian activism. Again, very interesting. In 1884, I'm moving into the next slide. In 1884, Anagarika Dharmapala's first visit was to India. It was to Adyar, headquarters of Theosophical Society. He went to study theosophy. Now, something very strange happened in there. It is not very clearly explained how it happened or for what reasons it happened. But at some point during this journey, when they went to Adyar, one day, Madam Blavatsky asked him to come to meet her in her room and said something very strange in the sense she advised her to go back to Sri Lanka and study Pali instead of studying theosophy. And she said that wherein all the knowledge necessary for him was available. So he said that you don't have to study theosophy. You go back to your country and you study Pali. In studying Pali, you will get everything you want in your life. This is something very interesting and intriguing because in Dharmapala, maybe both Olcott and Blavatsky found a ready-made, intelligent, young, the student for theosophy to continue with the theosophical philosophy. But then at this point, her advice was for him to go back and work for welfare of humanity. Anagarika Dharmapala left home, became Anagarika and started his life dedicated for service to humanity at that point. Now, I read this whole event as a beginning point of Anagarika Dharmapala's the type of universalism I am referring in this discussion. Now, if you look at the instruction of Blavatsky, we can see that Blavatsky asked him to go back and work for the humanity. Now, she doesn't ask him to go back and work for Ceylon. Okay, but what is recorded is ask him to go back and work for humanity. And also to work for humanity through the knowledge and understanding he gains from Buddhism. Now, studying Pali means, of course, effectively you are studying Buddhism. When you study Pali, you are not only not studying a mere language, you are studying the whole philosophy that was conveyed by that language. And then he became Anagarika and started, left home and dedicated his life ever since. So that is the beginning. Now, in this beginning, in this point, I see from some traces how his the kind of universalist understanding, universalist perception came into him. And the second visit was a very crucial visit where in 1981 he went again to International Buddhist Conference organized by Olcott at Adyar with 14 points common to all Buddhist traditions, vision for universal Buddhism. Now, this, I think, is a very, very crucial point for Anagarika's vision of Buddhism. Because now here, Olcott formulated 14 points. These 14 points he considered to be common to all schools of Buddhism. Now he came from United States. Maybe he was exposed to some Mahayana schools coming from China and Japan. And also he may have read other things, and he was a widely read person. And then he formulated 14 points, right? 14 points common to all Buddhist traditions. Now, this is really something very, very interesting. We know that the Olcott wanted to, Olcott got Venerable Hikkaduesi Sumangala to read all these points, and he got the approval of Venerable Hikkaduesi Sumangala that these points were valid for the entire teaching of the Buddha. But the point I am laying emphasis in this context is actually the Olcott's this formulation of 14 points, and Dharmapala taking this to India for this conference, representing Olcott. But the important thing is Anagarika Dharmapala may have developed the concept of universal Buddhism with this influence. I mean, this is a clear example when his mentor, Olcott, of course, we know that at a later stage, Anagarika Dharmapala and Olcott, the split and parted their company, certain circumstances. But at this point, of course, they were, Olcott was his mentor. And then this 14-point Buddhism, the vision for universal Buddhism is, very, very interesting thing. And then he visited, it is this time that he visited Buddha Gaya. Now, visiting Buddha Gaya is, in a sense, we can interpret this as a pretty regional thing. He went to Buddha Gaya and he got moving into the next slide. He saw the dilapidated situation and also the unfortunate situation of Buddha Gaya, which was ruled by some Hindu priests. So he wanted to get Buddha Gaya back to Buddhist. In order to achieve that, he established what is called Mahabodhi Society. Initially, it was called Buddha Gaya, originally Buddha Gaya Mahabodhi Society. Now, the point I want to stress here is, now look at his vision. Let me just read this. At this hallowed spot, full of imperishable associations, it is proposed to re-establish a monastery for the residence of bhikkhus, representing the Buddhist countries of Tibet, Ceylon, China, Japan, Cambodia, Burma, Chittagong, Nepal, Korea, and Arakan. Now look at this list. This list covers Theravada, Mahayana, and Vajrayana, all the three Buddhist traditions. So at a very, very early stage, this is 1891. Now, Dharmapala is thinking in terms of all the Buddhist traditions. We hope to found also a college of Buddha Gaya for training young men of unblemished character, of whatever race and country for the Buddhist order. Whatever, I repeat, whatever race and country for the Buddhist order, Sangha. On the lines of the ancient Buddhist university at Nalanda, where were taught the Mahayana and also works belonging to the 18 sects. The study of Sanskrit, Pali, English will be made compulsory to all students. One or more Buddhist schools from each of the Buddhist countries will be attached to the staff of teachers. Now, if you read this passage again carefully, you can see that at that very early stage at Buddha Gaya, Dharmapala was not only thinking rescuing Buddha Gaya, regaining the ownership of Buddha Gaya to the Buddhists. He was thinking much wider. He was thinking of creating a global Buddhism. He was thinking of creating a center, education center, where this type of global Buddhists are made, where they are educated. So I think this activism in India, particularly the origin of the beginning of the Buddha Gaya, is in that sense very important. Now, moving into the next slide, you can see that from the constitution of Mahabodhi, the society represents Buddhism in general. I repeat, the society represents Buddhism in general, okay, shall preserve absolute neutrality with respect to doctrines and dogmas taught by sections and sects among Buddhists. So this is, as quoted by Kemper. Now, this is again very interesting. So he emphatically says that Mahabodhi society is not merely a Theravada society or Theravada society alone, but it represents Buddhism in general. And then he says that sectarian views are not, taken into consideration. And then look at the next important thing. The first board comprised the following. Now I give you the list. Of course, I don't need to read, but you can see that Royal Highness Chandradhar Chaudhar, he is Prince of Siam, and Right Reverend Shaku Unisio, Tokyo, Jokyojitere Machi, Sojo Sagaru, Kyato, and all these people from Myanmar, then finally from Burma, and also from Arakan. Now here again you can see that Mahabodhi was a society representing the Buddhism in general, or we can say Mahabodhi is a society that was representing global Buddhism. Interesting thing is actually when we see the subsequent period after the demise of Anagarika Dharmapala, after 1930s, we know that these ideas did not receive full attention of the Buddhist world. Now, this is what makes Anagarika Dharmapala's Buddhism and the Anagarika Dharmapala's vision quite unique, and it is unfortunate that it was not continued in the manner he expected. Okay, then we will move into the next slide to the West. Now, talking about the West, again, there are so many things, but I focus only on the very first encounter of the Dharmapala's encounter with the West, namely the World Parliament of Religion, which took place in 1893. Now, this invitation came to the Buddhists in Sri Lanka, and then Venerable Hikadwe, Sri Sumangala, and other leading the Buddhists in Colombo convened and discussed whom to send there. Then finally they decided on Dharmapala. So Dharmapala was sent into Chicago. Now look at when it came to Anagarika Dharmapala was the leading representative. Of course, there were representatives from Japan and some other countries, particularly from Japan, but they were the kind of hampered, the limited, with their limited knowledge in English communication. But we know that Dharmapala didn't have that problem because, he had English medium education from very early childhood, and also the Western type of education. So he was very, very comfortable in this audience. Now, what I would like you to look at this, again, I quote, let me just read it a little bit. Now, this is how Dharmapala started his talk. He says, he started, I bring to you, I think he started saying, my brothers and sisters. He started by saying, my brothers and sisters. And I bring to you the good wishes of 474 million of Buddhists. Now, look at how he started. Now, I mean, when I saw this statement, I was kind of intrigued. How come this person going from this tiny island of Sri Lanka suddenly thinking that he is representing the entire Buddhist world? Whereas in the same platform, same meeting, Anagarika Dharmapala found that there were Buddhists from Japan and there were some Buddhists from other countries. But this is the way he started this first talk in the conference, the good wishes of 474 million Buddhists, which means that he was referring to the entire Buddhist population in the world, and the blessings and peace of the religious founder of that system, which has prevailed so many centuries in Asia, which had made Asia mild, and which is today, in its 24th century of existence, the prevailing religion of those countries. I have sacrificed the greatest of all work to attend this parliament. So now he comes up with some kind of personal information. He says he had to sacrifice greatest of all work he was doing in order to attend the conference. Now, what is this greatest of all work? I have left the work of consolidating the different Buddhist countries, which is the most important work in the history of modern Buddhism. Now, look at these words. Actually, it's very, very, in a way, very interesting, and also in a way, very intriguing. And how did he develop this kind of vision? Now, here he has undertaken unto himself this gigantic task of consolidating the different Buddhist countries, which is the most important work in the history of modern Buddhism. So here, I think these are the key points I would like you to consider when we think about Anagarika Dharmapala's the vision of Buddhism as a global religion. Now, another example is London Buddhist Vihara, the first Theravada Buddhist monastery in the West. He first visited London on his way back from World Parliament of Religion, that means 1893, and he was received by Sir Edwin Arnold, as you know, who wrote Light of Asia, and also Annie Besant, who was the president of Theosophical Society by that time. And the Venerable Ananda Mette, Alan MacGregor Bennett, London Buddhist Society, supported by, and it was supported by Anagarika Dharmapala. He strived to build a vihara for this society, but the society gradually declined. The idea behind was to give Buddhism to the West. Now, later, although initially he wanted to support Venerable Ananda Mette's movement, but the movement, I think he had to discontinue his monastic life due to his personal illness, and that movement gradually died down. Then subsequently, Dharmapala took initiative to establish London Buddhist Vihara. The idea was basically, let me move back to the previous slide. The idea behind was to give Buddhism to the West. Now, Dharmapala thought that the West needs Buddhism very much. It is the duty of the Buddhists, like countries of Sri Lanka, to give this great religion to the West. Okay, now here I think I have given you some significant points of Anagarika Dharmapala's life. What I wanted to highlight was to see how a kind of concept of world Buddhism was created in Anagarika Dharmapala's mind, and then how he really put that into practice. Now, from Anagarika Dharmapala, to understand the universalist this vision, I want you to move back to the basic text. Now, I refer to one discourse in the Sanyutta Nikaya, where Buddha thinks about, reflects about. I mean, this happens before his renunciation. So as Prince Siddhartha, at some point, according to this sutta in the Sanyutta Nikaya, he was wondering about reflecting on the nature of the world. Now, the term he used, this world has fallen into trouble. In Pali, it is called Kichang Vatayang Loko Apanno. So the word used is loko. Kichang Vatayang Loko Apanno. This world has fallen into trouble. Now, I think the seed of Buddhist universalism, Buddhist philosophy as a universalist philosophy, is contained in this statement. Now, think about Prince Siddhartha. He was a prince in India, in the northern part of India, in today's standard, fairly small kingdom, hilly kingdom, and a remote area. It was in the kingdom of larger kingdom of Kosala, but it belonged into Kosala, and in Kosala it was in the suburbs. So in a way we can say that it was a very, very small kingdom. And then the Siddhartha was to be the heir of this kingdom. But on the other hand, he was not the ruler of Magadha, or he was not the ruler of Kosala, or any one of the Mahajanapadas, or the bigger kingdoms. In this very small kingdom, remote area, but look at the thinking. The thinking was not about himself. I mean, Siddhartha was thinking about the world, the world beyond him, the entire humanity, not only really humanity, the entire world below, including all beings, not only human beings. So he thinks Tichang Vatayang Loko Apanno. I think this is the basis of the story of Satara Peranimiti, the four signs about life he saw subsequently. I mean, the story of Satara Peranimiti, which we learned from our grandparents, so at the Hampasala, has a very the significant philosophical meaning. It is not really, as you know, it is not simply seeing an old man, sick person and a dead body. It is seeing the sickening nature, old age, and finally death in human life, which unsettled Siddhartha completely, and he thought finally this is the plight of the the entire world, not only me. So he thought that he should look for a solution. So Buddhism as a religion for all humanity, the Buddhist ethics embracing all humanity and the world of animals as well as God. So here you can see that the universalist vision of Buddhism for Dharmapala should, in a way, should not be coming from anywhere else. It is coming from Buddhism itself. So on the one hand, we can see that the Dhamma is a universalist Dhamma, but it is a historical question whether Dharmapala read these things and whether he got it, or whether he got it from some other sources. Towards the end of my discussion, another couple of minutes, I will try to conjecture on this, but that is up to discussion. But anyhow, the point I would like to make at this juncture is that the philosophy of the Buddha, teaching of the Buddha itself is a universalist philosophy. Okay, and finally, now when we think about Anagarika Dharmapala and Anagarika Dharmapala's vision of Buddhism and his service to the world, it is very interesting to see that although he was in Sri Lanka at the beginning of the last century, when things were pretty, of course, in many standards, we were still not very industrialized or scientific nation, but the kind of thinking Anagarika Dharmapala developed. So then today, of course, my initial question was why we are talking about Anagarika Dharmapala today. I mean, all of us know that we are living in a globalized society today. And then Buddhism itself has become globalized. And then it reaches the globe every corner. Now, the very fact that I'm talking to you from Colombo and you are listening in over there in UK itself is the example of, very good example of what is called globalization. Technically, globalization means reducing or reduction of time and space. So here, of course, we are 4.5 hours, we are separated, but still we reach each other. So today we are living in a fully globalized world, fully globalized society, particularly with this corona epidemic. We know that we are talking through this Zoom media to the world. Now, in usual circumstances, if I were to deliver this talk to a London group of, the literary society, I would have gone there with the invitation and go to London. But today, not only this speech, I have been asked to do number of this kind of presentation in several parts of the world. It's not boasting, but simply saying that today we are addressing all these things from one place. Tourism point of view, this is not very attractive naturally. But on the other hand, effectiveness, because we are communicating fairly all right. So anyway, we are in a globalized society. Now, the interesting thing and also the relevance of Anagarika Dharmapala for today is actually, in a way, we can say that Anagarika Dharmapala foresaw what will be coming in the world in future. Now, he had this thinking in early 20th century. Now, from that point, of course, we have passed even, more than 100 years. So you can see how this thinking was formed and how effective this thinking is. Now, in 1950, you know that late Professor G.P. Malalasekara, who initiated the World Fellowship of Buddhists, which was convened in Colombo, that was 1950. So to be exact, 72 years ago, WFB was established. Now the philosophy behind WFB was basically exactly the philosophy this Dharmapala had, namely that the Buddhists all over the world should get together irrespective of their various regional and sectarian differences, for the main reason that doctrinally the teaching of the Buddha does not have fundamental differences among the schools. Now, this takes us back to Henry Steele Olcott, who formulated in 1884, who formulated 14 points. As I indicated earlier, 14 points common to all Buddhists. So you can see how the vision comes. So it is Olcott formulating these points, Anagarika Dharmapala taking these points to the international conference representing Olcott these points to the world Buddhists. So in Adyar, that conference was attended by many Buddhist representatives from many Buddhist countries. And then in 1950, Gunapala Malasekara, who was not born Gunapala Malasekara. He had, I think, I don't remember, some English first name like Sam or something like that. But then he changed his name into Gunapala Malasekara, and he changed his clothes into white, our national dress, and completely changed, became a changed person. And subsequently in 1950, you can see that he started World Fellowship of Buddhists. Okay, now this is kind of, the history, natural unfolding of the history culminating in this organization. Finally, I think I promised to talk about 45 minutes, but I can't see my watch. It is dark. But I think I have spoken. Described my point. But the one last point I would like to briefly discuss is where did we know that the influence of Olcott on Anagarika Dharmapala is clear, right? But then I think the universalist position, attribution of universalism on the part of Olcott, and also his activism to unite and get the common point common to all Buddhist traditions, I think come from my understanding or my interpretation is that from his theosophy. Now, theosophy basically means that there is some kind of essence in the universe which is beyond all the religions. Now, there is a very popular Vedic saying which goes as follows: Ekang hi sat vipra bahudha vadanti. The sat, the truth is one, the sages describe it differently. Now, this comes in the Rig Veda. But, this statement remains very popular, particularly among theosophists, among others theosophists, because ultimately it says that the truth is one. Various sages is describe it differently. Now, this was the understanding Henry Steele Olcott and also Madame Blavatsky had. So for them, Buddhism is another statement of that truth. That is why I think they, without much discomfort, they embraced, they received 5 precepts and they became Buddhist. But for them to become Buddhist, they don't have to be cease to be theosophists, because this is, I'm kind of conjecturing, okay? This is not something I read from anywhere, but I can kind of see the connection. So the theosophy brings all religions together because they believe that all religions ultimately lead into one truth. So from that point of view, Buddhism is also representative of that one truth. But when Olcott embraced, accepted Buddhism, maybe it annoyed his mind that there were schools within Buddhism, and those schools were separated from each other physically and also psychologically. So maybe that is why he wanted to find the common ground for all the three different Buddhist traditions. Maybe that is the first step. Second step, maybe, I don't know whether Olcott tried to do that or Olcott lived to do that, but maybe he might have wanted to find common factors for all the religions, perhaps, because that's also in accordance with theosophical philosophy. So I'm just wondering whether, I mean, maybe Dharmapala even did know or did not know, we don't know. But for people like Stephen Kemper, if anyone can read that book, that's a fascinating interpretation, but fairly large book. Stephen Kemper tries to attribute some kind of this type of universalism, the philosophy of universalism to Anagarika Dharmapala, which is beyond my topic at this juncture. But I'm just trying to see where this is coming from. So I see possible two things. One thing is, as I indicated, in the Sanyutta Nikaya, I mean, the Buddhism is a universalist philosophy from the beginning. So it is very, very well that Dharmapala could get that philosophy from the Buddha himself. But we don't have much evidence that Dharmapala was that much of a great Buddhist scholar. I mean, I'm not really underestimating. He was a Buddhist scholar enough, but of course he was much more an activist than a scholar, right? So for scholarly things, he depended on these eminent Buddhist monks. So from that, we can say from that perspective, of course, there is nothing new. Buddhism is a universalist philosophy. But here, Dharmapala's vision, we have to understand in the context of globalizing society, globalizing forces, where in which he wanted to see Buddhism being active globally. So, my friends, these are some of the thoughts that come into my mind when I think of Anagarika Dharmapala's global vision of Buddhism. As I indicated at the very beginning, Anagarika Dharmapala can't be reduced only onto this point, because he's a multifaceted person, did so much in so many places in Sri Lanka, India, and in the larger Western world. So please do not ever think that this is a comprehensive discussion of Anagarika Dharmapala. I am focusing only on one aspect. Now, in that aspect, I think I gave you sufficient evidence to show how a kind of universalist vision developed in Anagarika Dharmapala. So let me wind up at that. Giving me this opportunity. So I'm opening the floor for the discussion.
Thank you very much, Asanga, for explaining complicated philosophies to us in very lucid terms. And yes, Anagarika Dharmapala was amazing, because if you think within a Western milieu, and he's projecting his not only Buddhism nationally, but he's projecting it globally. So first of all, I'll see whether there are any questions. I need to stop sharing. Then if there are any hands up, it's easier for me rather than reading the chat. So anybody has, yes, I can see Sriya Kulupana.
Yeah, it's a comment more than a question. I may be interested to know, my father was his junior secretary at the age of 17 until he went to India for good. So I've heard lot about his passion and his kindness from my father, because he lived in the same premises as Anagarika Dharmapala, and my father wrote his biography also. So, Professor, you must have seen it, because it was published by Mahabodhi Society. My father's name is A.B. Sugatadasa.
Sugatadasa, right?
Yes, K.B.
Yeah,
Sugatadasa.
yeah. Okay. Yeah, surely I have heard the name. Yeah, that's right. But I did not know about the connection that much. But anyway, thank you very much for elaborating on this, giving us knowledge about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Any hands? If there are any questions, can you put your hands up?
I see a hand here.
Okay, who was the hand moved now? Someone put a hand up. Yes,
Suraj.
Suraj, okay.
Oh, Suraj, go ahead.
Mhm.
Could I ask please this, now I was at Ananda College all my life, and we heard so much about the Theosophical Society and Henry Steele Olcott. My understanding of theosophy was very superficial, and it was based on this philosophy that all religions, or one needs to learn all religions and to try to break the divisions among the religions. And it's almost sort of a comparative religion sort of forum. My understanding is very limited. Asanga, I just wondered whether you could sort of elaborate on that. And part of that is my sort of personal question I've had all my life, that yes, we follow different religions, but is it possible Christians go to heaven and the Buddhists go through samsara, and the Islam, people who follow Islam go to some different place? Or does the same thing happen to all living beings? Can that be that what theosophy means?
In fact, Suraj, this is a very complicated issue, because this idea that ultimately, the passage I quoted from Rig Veda, fairly well known, Ekang hi Sat, truth is one, different people describe it differently. Now, this particular statement has been used by many religious scholars recently. Particularly, there's a school of religious scholars and religious people today to say that all the existing religions ultimately talk about the same thing, refer to the same thing. But I am not a person who is subscribing to this view, because usually this view comes from the God-centered religions, and ultimately what they conclude is that, okay, it is the God who is spoken of in different languages. So they say that God can be spoken of as a person, and God can be spoken of as a non-person. So they say that for Hinduism, Islam, Judaism, and all these religions spoke of God as person. They use the Latin term personae. And then they say that the Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta and some other religions spoke of the God as non-person. Then they say that whether it is person or non-person, ultimately they are talking about one and the same thing. Okay, now this is the view. Now, the theosophy, I'm not also expert in theosophy, Suraj, but theosophy seems to be saying something very similar. They would say that this is the ultimate consciousness. They will not say it is the God, but ultimate consciousness. And then all the religions ultimately lead into this, this state. So in that sense, they see this as a kind of peace promoting movement. But for me, peace promoting peace is one thing, but whether you are really convinced or whether you think a religious tradition to be the truthful religious tradition is another thing. Two different things for me. But directly addressing the question you asked, now the concept of heaven, the very pleasurable place, you are born after the death. Now, this is common to almost all the religions, all the major religions that we know. This is a common idea. But one difference is that for God-centered religions, they believe that this heaven, this paradise, or many different terms, is your last destination where you are born and you are not reborn. So you are there forever. So the whole concept is either eternal heaven or eternal hell, right? So you go to heaven and you are there forever. Now the difference in the Buddhist concept, and also it is the same similar in some sense in Hinduism, Brahman religion also. Heaven is not a permanent place, but of course it can have a very long duration, long time, but still you come back. So you are not, particularly the Buddhist concept of heaven is heaven, the Divyaloka is subject to anicca, dukkha, anatta, impermanent, these things. So in that sense, the difference between human existence and divine existence is all the circumstances are pleasurable and the lasting for a long time. But in Buddhist tradition, the Buddha very often says that, but if your goal is just to be merrymaking or be happy, well, heaven is a good place. But if you are thinking of inner development and the liberation, Buddha says that being a human being is more advantageous. So the Buddhism has that kind of different the assessment of this existence. Would that answer your query? I'm sorry.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you.
And it's Ruan next.
Asanga, thank you very much for your lovely talk. The question I have can be a little bit controversial as well. So in any case, I'll ask you for your opinion. Now, you said at the start, Anagarika Dharmapala realized that the Western world needs Buddhism, and he took the first step in promoting Buddhism in Western countries. Now, we see probably more lately, I see that lots of Christian, sects who are trying to promote whatever they believe in Sri Lanka have been attacked by Buddhist priests. So there seems to be a contradiction in Dharmapala's vision of, the world needs Buddhism, and the same Buddhist priest, not Dharmapala obviously, Buddhist priest, were saying, we don't want anything other than Buddhism in our country. So any comments on this contradiction in Buddhism, please?
I did not get your. I mean, you are referring to the modern Buddhist monks or what?
Yes, sorry, not about those days. So we see lots of Buddhist monks. We have seen clips on YouTube, Buddhist monks attacking people, sometimes priests, who trying to promote whatever they believe in certain villages, saying that make ape palatu berata in the me ape palatu deval kiyan.
Do you mean like the now in Sri Lankan context? I see sometime, particularly in this YouTube culture, I see lots of popular preachers and some of these preachers having more than 5,000-6,000 sermons behind them for their credit or discredit, I don't know. But I mean that sort of kind of infighting within the Buddhist, particularly some members of the Buddhist Sangha. Is that what you are referring to, or the Buddhist monks' comments on the other religions? I'm still not very clear.
Yeah, so to be a little bit more clear, if we believe as Dharmapala believed that we have a wonderful thing in Buddhism and we need to share it with the rest of the world, should we not at the same time accept that either Christian sects or Islamic or other people coming to Sri Lanka and trying to share their views in the country? Is it, or should we take it as against the Buddhist philosophy?
Okay. Thank you. I got your point. Yeah, I mean, if we Buddhists think that the Western world needs Buddhism and we have a duty and also duty to go to Western world or anywhere Buddhism is not existing, that we should give Buddhism. What you ask is, don't the other religious people have the same, say, duty or right to come into our part of the world and propagate their religion? Yeah, actually, I'm in agreement with you. And then I don't know whether even Dharmapala was not in agreement with that kind of thing. But the distinct difference was, interestingly, difference is philosophical. The difference is this. Now, for example, I mean, if you take the historical example of Sri Lanka, when the Christian missionaries came to Sri Lanka, particularly at the beginning of the 19th century, you know that the Christian missionaries did not have places to teach or preach. And then when they visited villages, it is the village monk who provided the physical space in the Dharmashala, these Christian missionaries to talk. So the monk said, yeah, your religion is a good religion. Why don't you teach it? So he allowed. I mean, in those villages, you can imagine that there were no Christians, right? There were all the people were Buddhist, but it is the Buddhist monks who allowed them to use the Dharmashala to teach Christianity. But you know, it took on little bit time for the Buddhist monk to realize that these people are coming not only to teach, but also to replace Buddhism. That was the point when, you know, the Buddhist monks got really, it dawned upon them. They thought it is only then they knew that these people were not innocent. They wanted to replace Buddhism with their religion, and then naturally Buddhist monks got into the defensive. You know, it is very interesting actually at the initial level. There are even letters written by some Christian missionaries to their friend, kind of laughing at the naivete of Buddhist monks. Now, these people are so naive, so smiling, go to temple and they give you a cup of tea and all that, and also allow you to teach their religion. So they thought that Buddhist monks are so naive and so foolish. But actually, that Buddhist monks were not naive or foolish was known through the debates. Particularly, last was the Pandura Debate. So they did not ever come to debate with the Buddhist monks after that. Now, I think the difference is this. Now, if we, even today, if we say that any religious person should not come to Sri Lanka and should not teach their religion, I don't think that is the right attitude. And personally, for me also, I think any religious person, as long as you are within the limits of culture and civilization, I mean, you can teach your religion. But only thing is, today the debate is actually what is called unethical conversion. It's not about the conversion. It's about the unethical conversion in the sense that you bribe people to change religion, or you make use of poverty and the helplessness of the people to change religion. And I have some personal experience. I know that in 2004.
So any more questions? Because we have about 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 7 minutes.
Counts. I'm sorry for that disturbance. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. We speak.
So then where I saw is that, you know, when people were, you know, that all, I mean, so many people died and so many people did not know what happened to their relatives. And there we saw some religious groups were trying to convert these sorrow-stricken, poor, you know, the people who were living in, you know, the temporary camps, which was a disgusting thing to see. So you see the real Buddhist position is that any person can teach his or her own religion. There is no doubt about that. But only thing is you do that within the limits of intellectual honesty and integrity. I think for Buddhists, for us to, we don't need to go that far. You take the example of the Buddha. Now, did the Buddha have Buddhists to teach when he became enlightened? No, he did not have Buddhists. So from the very beginning, you know that Buddha converted people. But in conversion, you look at the Kalama Sutta, you look at the Vimansaka Sutta and many other places, Buddha always gave freedom for the person. Okay, this is what I think, but I don't force you to accept it. So Buddha thought that it is his duty to teach the right thing. But whether that person accept the right thing, it is beyond the Buddha. So there were surely definitely some people who said no thanks. But then Buddha was not worried about it. So the example coming. So anyway, thank you for your question. If Dharmapala thought that Buddhist monks should go to Western, but the Western people should not come to Sri Lanka and teach Christianity, yes, that's a contradiction. But I have not found any evidence of Dharmapala to hold in that position.
Thank you, Asanga. Ajanta is next.
It's me, really, Rasika. I've got a comment to make and a couple of questions. But before you go there, I'd like to, you just mentioned about the conversion and the importance of conversion. I think this is particularly applicable in Christianity as opposed to Buddhism. And I say that because I'm married to a Christian and I can see the influence his family has. They think they are doing a good thing, and they think that unless somebody is converted, they will not have the benefit of going to heaven after death. So their liberation, their sense of liberation. So that's, I think, where this conversion, the force to convert, comes into play. But my comment was, it's so unfortunate when Dharmapala more than 100 years ago tried to unify the various sectors of Buddhism. We still have so much division within the within Buddhists that and I don't know, I think it is even more so now than then, but I don't have an answer to that. There's so many different types of Buddhism sprouting, more than the big three. And the third comment I want to make is about how Suraj said about religious education we had in school. And I've brought this topic up in previous meetings of the SLLS. Now, Anagarika Dharmapala was quite fortunate in that he had wide exposure to both Buddhism and Christianity, being born in a devout Buddhist family and going to be educated in the Christian background. But we, for example, grew up in Sri Lanka, where we were divided into Buddhists or Christianity or whatever, and we had a very narrow view of only our religion. And whereas our children who grew up here had RE or religious education, and they have a wider breadth of knowledge of all the other religions, and they are much more understanding and compassionate. And that would be the answer to Sri Lanka's political divides, racial divides. A lot of harmony could be brought about if the curriculum could incorporate religious education and not each and every person's religion. So I don't know what steps are taken on that score.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your comments and questions. Let me very briefly address some of some issues, important issues you raised. On the first thing about the conversion and the general Christian attitude that salvation is only through God. Now, of course, this is fairly traditional view. It has become a traditional view today because it is the Christian and Roman Catholic churches mostly today are trying to practice what is called interreligious understanding. Now, in this interreligious understanding discussions, they themselves seriously question this, whether the salvation is only through God. Now, Christian, the world is divided on this, but many people would like to say that, no, the salvation is not only through God, the salvation can have many different ways. But, again, it's kind of different, but as a Buddhist practitioner, I have taken part in many parts of the world in this kind of discussions, where I can see that is ultimately they say, okay, Buddhism is fine, Hinduism is fine, all the other religions are fine, so long as, or ultimately they refer to in God in either personal or impersonal way. Now there I see that particularly in the Christian religion, I mean, this is not a criticism, this is just what I find. The loss of even the practitioners of interreligious dialogue, although they claim to be dialoguing, you can see that ultimately they end up in the concept of God. So, I mean, it's a very complicated issue, but I feel uncomfortable about it because, the whole concept of nirvana according to Buddhism has nothing to do with God. So therefore, you know, this conversion issue, or even now, nobody is really talking conversion too much, but this interreligious dialogue too has been criticized by others. This is conversion in disguise. So, you know, that debate goes on. Okay. Then coming into the many different sects in Buddhism and, you know, the school education today, actually, one good thing I see today is particularly due to globalization and also all other the improvements in communication. We can see that today all these three Buddhist traditions are really physically and doctrinally coming together. Now, for example, if you listen to a person like His Holiness Dalai Lama, I mean, listen carefully. I don't think you can really distinguish whether he's talking Mahayana, Vajrayana, or Theravada. Very often I hear. I mean, I have met him personally a couple of times. My last encounter was, again, I'm sorry for being autobiographic. I met him in a conference on mind in two years ago before Corona in Saranath. When I gave my presentation on mind, he was so happy and he said, Asanga, we say the same thing. Then, you know, I mean, he kind of, you know, the loudly laughing, he said, we say the same thing. So, you know, then after that, he kind of developed rapport with me. And, but not only because of that, but today I see that all the three Buddhist traditions are coming together. And even in Sri Lanka, we know that I have heard that in 1930s, 40s, like, you know, long time ago, even within Sri Lanka, the monks belonging to three Nikayas would not even meet face to face, even at a dane or religious ceremony. But today the Buddhism has changed. I mean, the Buddhist society has changed quite a lot. We see that Buddhist monks irrespective. So those are all, I can say, a lot of positive things about that aspect. However, your reference to the religious education in the country, and then again, my understanding is somewhat different. It's true that Buddhists are taught Buddhism and the Christians are taught Christianity and the Islamic people are taught Islam. But then I am familiar with the text we are using in the school system. Actually, there were some questions about the Islamic text, but particularly if you look at the Christian text and the Buddhist text, they really teach about, I mean, one or two lessons on the other religious teachers, and they are very respectful and reverential and give a very positive idea about the other religions. However, the problems and the ills of our country, I would say, not really based on religion. Even this North and, you know, so-called all this problem, according to my understanding, is not based on religion, really. They really go into much more into the ethnics and the constructed history and, you know, the myths and, you know, I mean, this is not the time to go into that debate. But what I want to say is religion is not really a culprit here. I mean, I'm not saying that everything with the religious people is great or without, no, I'm not saying that. But as far as the education system or the country is concerned, I would say that the education system does not encourage this kind of, you know, the attu kansana, you know, the like, you know, the elevating yourself and, you know, downgrading the other, you know, that is not. But my experience with actually England, English education is a little different. When I remember when I was in Oxford in, of course, about 2000, my son was going to school there, and then he had of course, they were introducing Hinduism and, you know, all the religions. And one day he brought a book to me on Hinduism for the very, very small children. You know what the cover picture carried? And a very ordinary Indian squatting on the ground and chewing beetle. What this has to be with Hinduism? I mean, this is the kind of impression. I'm not saying that it continues even today, but, you know, it is one thing to give the so-called religious education, but very subtle manner you give that, okay, Hinduism is very primitive. I mean, they are squatting on the floor, and their job is to the chew beetle and spit all around, that sort of thing. I mean, I'm not, this is not a blanket criticism, but you can't really generalize. But as far as my knowledge in Sri Lankan education system, I'm open to correction, and of course you can come and see that. I mean, there can be many wrong things. I mean, many weaknesses in our education system. But as far as religious education is concerned, of course, it is not very effective either. But it doesn't promote, this kind of attitude about other religions. No, I don't think so. But therefore, our problem, so-called ethnic thing we were facing, has nothing basically to do with religion. That's my understanding. Okay.
I agree with you, Asanga, because I find that monotheistic religions are promoted all the time, and the other religions are promoted as Eastern mysticism or something strange,
Right.
othering. So there are two. Asanta is running out of time, Asanga, but there are two quick questions. Are you able to take two quick questions?
Yeah, we will spend 5 more minutes maximum. Yeah.
Okay, Lakshmi first, and then Suga.
After listening to that very talk, Professor Asanga Tilakaratne, I think I endorse your view that in religious education, I have my 2 grandchildren doing religious education here in England, and when I see their textbooks, I see only a very simplified version. It's not of Buddhism; it is the story of the Siddhartha. Things like that doesn't give any concept of the real theme of Buddhism. So that is a very basic, and as far as they will learn the 5 precepts, but that is all it is in the philosophy. So religious education actually in I don't think in most countries that give the true essence of the religion.
Right.
The children are also too small to understand the essence, I believe, unless they do it in the higher classes. So religious education is stopped, I think, when they come to grade 9 or 10. So I think it is too basic. And I agree with the doctor say that our religious education, Buddhism education in Sri Lanka is quite comprehensive. Even when we studied the Venerable Narada's book and everything, and still we remember what it says, and it has given us a very strong spine to carry on this long. I think that religious education which our grandmothers at home and the school gave, we can stand very erect, and I value it to this day.
Thank you.
I also like to ask you a very quick question. Doctor, you said that the Anagarika Dharmapala tried to make the culture not only the Buddhism, but to make it a bit posh. Can you give an example, please?
Yeah, surely. I mean, I don't have the document at hand, but posh in the sense, how to eat, how to sit down. Now, I mean, for example, certain things are unfortunate. Like, we say when we want to say thank you in Sri Lanka, even though we speak Sinhala, we say thank you. But then what is the Sinhala word for that? Sinhala word for that is Boma Ping, right? I mean, we smile genuinely with that person for the help. But today what has happened is we don't know how to say Boma Ping, or we even don't have a grateful smile on our face. Some people simply think that they are birthright or something, and then we say thank you. But that shows that we have borrowed it from the West. But it is wrong to think that we never had the way to appreciate in our culture. We had, although it was not verbal always, we always showed our gratitude. So the Dharmapala really wanted the articulate culture. Now he got those things, although, as I said, in the Buddhist tradition we have them, but the I think he talks about the particularly girls and the women, and how they should use their clothes, and some of those things are a little closer to the Victorian age. I mean, but I don't have the document at my hand right now, but you can look at it and see whether what I said is justifiable or not.
Yeah,
So, that's the kind of impression I get. So he wanted to create a kind of push, because he was coming from a very urban family, right? Rich urban family, his culture was like that. So I could see both. That's why.
Okay.
And it's Suraj now.
Can I quickly ask 3 questions,
Oh.
please? To take you back to the beginning of your lecture today, you mentioned that the bhikkhus being part of the having a social function was centered at Vidyodaya and Vidyalankara Pirivenas.
Right.
Now, the general understanding is that Vidyalankara then metamorphosed into the Kelaniya University at Vidyalankara University, and Vidyodaya became Javardhanapura. But
Right.
I suspect Vidyodaya that you were referring to is the Vidyodaya Pirivena at Maligakanda. Is that correct?
Correct. Not the Vidyodaya University. Vidyodaya Pirivena at
Vidyodaya
Maligakanda, Sri at Paligoda.
Paligoda, yes, yeah. Now, my second question, Asanga, was in the sociological context. Now, assuming we all agree that Anagarika Dharmapala played a pretty important part in the socio-cultural changes that took place. When I read about Anagarika Dharmapala, I understood that he had a very English type of education, gone to Christian schools and was conversant in the English language,
Right.
which I suspect broadened his vision of the world. I could not stop thinking about a few others who also made a huge impact on the Sri Lankan socio-cultural context. One is Munidasa Kumaratunga, the other one is Martin Wickramasinghe, and the third one is Lester James Pearis. Now, I've read that Munidasa Kumaratunga and Martin Wickramasinghe would talk in English at the YMBA canteen in Borella about so this general theme that appears to exist nowadays, that English is a hindrance to being very Sri Lankan, probably not that true and correct.
Yeah. Actually, I think, Suraj, your comment really I appreciate it, because at some point in our Sri Lankan education system, and also more so in the Sri Lankan political system, we really made this wrong, the decision with the wrong perception that English knowledge will make you say like the less Sri Lankan or less Sinhalese or anything like that. But the consequent generation of people that were produced for last, now it is changing. So I would say the starting from end of 20th century or something, because today now it is changing very rapidly. But the consequent generation of people really did not know about the world, and then they don't have the depth of they can't look at the issue, in the deep perspective. So all these things came because of this wrong perception. Now, actually, you, according to my own analysis, my own understanding, now if you teach your child from the very beginning in a particular language, you can't stop that culture coming into that child from that language. Okay, now, for example, when my own son, he went to Royal College, and then he had at some point, the option to go to English medium studies. I said, no, you study English very well, but you do your studies in Sinhala medium. Because I do believe, Suraj, I'm not saying that, of course, you can teach your child in English or any other language, but then you have to accept that you are teaching also that culture, right? So long as you know that, you know it knowingly, then that's fine. But otherwise, if you really want to retain, make use of the language as a tool for your life, then it is the best thing is to teach your own mother tongue, or that to your child, and then of course teach some other languages as tools for the pragmatic reasons. So Now, today what has happened is actually, as you correctly said, Munidasa Kumarasanga was, the Sinhala hero. But, in all the pictures, you know what I'm saying, he is fully three-piece suit, right? Wearing in the Western dress. But others are, I can see in the Guru Abhyasa Vidyalaya, other teachers are wearing white, whatever the native things, but he was full gentleman in that sense. Now, the same thing is Martin Vikram Singh. He studied English not from school, but reading books and all that. So actually, when a person is fairly grounded on your own culture, I think that is a very important thing for children. Which culture you choose, I think the language plays a very important role in that. But once you have that, how many languages the person learns and how many uses absolutely doesn't make any difference. But anyway, let me wind up the discussion saying that today what has happened, however, is we are teaching English from the kindergarten, and then you will not believe after A-level, we get a student in our university system who sometimes cannot even write their name properly in English. I don't know whether you will believe this or not, but this is my personal experience. So I am wondering where the whole English education, the collapse. Maybe even the teachers don't know. I don't know. But today, so we are claiming that. Actually, from the kindergarten, we are teaching. But English education is not successful in our country. So something is drastically wrong. So we need to do something about it. So I think, we need to discuss more. So Shihan, I think time for me to go.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Asanga, for persevering with the power cuts and for enlightening us. Ruan, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I'll be very short knowing that Asanga has to go. So this is the time when everybody would like to show your face so that we could, in our traditional manner, say thank you to Asanga. So if you put on your videos and let's put our hands together to Asanga. Thank you so much, Asanga. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you for the question. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Shihan. Thank you, all the participants. Okay. Thank you so much. All right.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.